Namaskar and welcome to Sansad Television. I am Vishal Dahiya and you're watching our show Perspective, where we bring you detailed analysis of key national and international issues. Today we're going to talk about the issue of terrorism, the threat of terrorism and global efforts to counter this threat. In fact, India hosted United Nations Security Council's Counter-Terrorism Committee's two-day meet this week, which was attended by representatives of 15 UNSC members. Highlighting terror threats from the use of emerging technologies, External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar said terrorism is still one of the gravest threats to humanity. With China blocking the listing of 5 Pakistan-based terrorists in recent weeks, Jaishankar and his US counterpart also raised this issue of listing planners of 26/11 Mumbai terror attack. Indian officials gave the details of the conspiracy and 26/11 attack in a presentation at the CTC meeting. Now, drawing parallels between the 2008 Mumbai attack and the 2005 London suicide bombings, British Foreign Secretary called on the international community to starve terror groups of financing and said the advent of technology had dramatically changed the nature of attacks and of recruitment by the terror groups. So what exactly is being done by the international community, and what are the challenges vis-a-vis the emerging technologies and their use by the terror groups? So we'll try and analyze all these aspects, and for more on this we're joined by a distinguished panel of experts. Let me first introduce them to you, beginning with retired Major General Dhruv C. Katoch, who is with us here in the studio. He's the Director of India Foundation. Welcome, General Katoch, to our studios. We're also joined by Professor Harsh V. Pant, Vice President, Studies and Foreign Policy at ORF, and Pramit Pal Chaudhary, Foreign Affairs Editor with the Hindustan Times, is also with us. Welcome, both of you gentlemen as well. I'll begin with you, General Katoch, and let's first start by understanding the significance of this two-day meet of UNSC's counter-terror committee there, and how resolutions being or decisions being taken, or the conversations which happen at this platform are significant.
I think it is very significant that meetings of this nature are continuously held. Whether something positive comes out of it to a small extent or to a larger extent can be seen. But the point is, at least the meetings are being held, which indicates that the world focus is on these issues. That is one. The second point, I think, which is important to understand, is that largely terrorism today, despite the fact that, of course, everybody says there is technology and new advancements have come up in recruitment, etc. But ultimately terrorism still remains a political weapon. And I think this is where the basic problem comes in the fight against terrorism. Because so long as countries are not physically impacted by themselves by acts of terror, they tend to downplay it. And as India has been a victim of terror for many years, we found the West only getting involved in anti-terrorism conferences and group action after the Americans were hit in 9/11. And after that, of course, there have been off and on attacks in various European countries, which has kept the attention focused on them. But if the attacks were not taking place on them, then that focus is not there.
Okay.
So, having said that, the important thing which I think we need to understand is that the political intent cannot be taken out.
Okay.
So, the seriousness of it will really impact upon which countries are being affected. That is one. As far as the Financial Action Task Force is concerned, I think it is a vital input, because this is one body which can really put the brakes on future acts of terrorism. Without finances, terrorism dies down.
In fact, External Affairs Minister Jaishankar in his speech address at this particular conference, also in his 5-point agenda, addressed this particular issue, that terror financing will have to be dealt with, because ultimately money is what pushes the terror agenda.
Having said that, you see, Pakistan was still taken out of the FATF grey list. Now that is where the contradictions really lie. And with advancement in technology, especially with communication technology, I think the challenges when we go ahead in the future are going to be immense.
Okay. Professor Pant, as General Katoch is pointing out, this is a global threat, terrorism. It's an issue which affects almost everybody, but the counterproductive ways of looking at this particular issue by various countries And those issues have also come to the fore, given the fact that in this meeting itself, both India and United States of America pointed out to the fact that some terrorists have not been included in the list. Rather, their entry has been blocked by countries like China. So issues like these, they do put a roadblock in the overall battle against the threat of terror.
Yes, I think unfortunately that has been the case, Vishal, with this issue of terrorism. Not only is terrorism ultimately a political instrument by which non-state actors and certain state actors try to push their agenda, but also the way global governance on this issue has shifted or has evolved means that it will always remain a very, very political issue. And I think at this particular point in time, where great power contestation is increasing by the day, where we do see two blocks emerging, where we do see China challenging the established norms and discourses, I think, unfortunately, the problem is only going to get worse if at all we see the trend lines clearly. And what China does on global platforms, on multilateral issues, is something that I think has been one of the rallying points for a large part of the world to come together and say that, look, the multilateral order today is not fit for purpose. So in this particular case, when you think of terrorism and when you think of political aspects that are shaping or that continue to shape the discourse as well as the operationalization of certain ideas, that's a reality that we have to live with. But I think what this conference underscores is India's commitment to this issue, that India will always continue to highlight this issue as an important one, not only for itself, but also for a large part of the world, especially at a time when the appetite for this is going down, right? Because you look at around the world, there are too many challenges. Great power politics has come back with a bang, and you have, Ukraine war, you have global inflationary pressures. I think so much is happening in the world that nation states really and governments really have very little bandwidth to think about terrorism as perhaps as potent a weapon or as potent a problem as it was, say, a decade back. Now, for India and for countries like India to continue to raise this issue and to continue to galvanize a large part of the world is going to be very, very important part of how we take this issue forward. Because otherwise, there is a very real danger that not only are we going to see major powers focusing in different directions, but also major world powers not giving this issue the kind of importance that it continues to deserve. And for India, really, this is a very hard choice, because India is surrounded by countries that continue to champion terrorism and that continue to shape the discourse and ideas around terrorism in very negative ways. So I think this is this kind of conversations and engagements are important, and for India to take the lead, which I think India has taken also over the last few years, continuously raising this issue, keeping the global community engaged with this issue, is a very important development from India's leadership perspective as well as the larger global governance perspective. Okay,
Pramit, do you agree with those parts there, that what is crucial and what is important and significant here is India taking the lead on global engagement on the issue of terror? That's one, and of course, a cohesive approach towards dealing with this, specifically looking at the issue of terror financing and dealing with the use of emergent technologies as well.
Yes, so I think that the issue of, as Harsh has already mentioned, the issue has to be kept alive. With the war in the Ukraine, with tensions on Taiwan between US and China, and any number of civil wars and so on across the planet, it's very hard for anybody to really focus on terrorism anymore, especially after the destruction or reduction, if you wish, of Al-Qaeda and a lot of its affiliates across the planet. A worldwide global terrorist network no longer really exists, though it's quite possible that it may come back, especially in West Africa. So after that, you've seen a drop-off. We need to keep that issue alive, because we remain in an area of the world which not only is Pakistan continuing to maintain a terror network that can be revived or expanded at any moment. We do have a regime in Afghanistan that was one of the most foremost sponsors of terror in the world, including providing a safe haven for Al-Qaeda when it was first created. So that issue has to be maintained. And second, as the Foreign Minister, Dr. Jaishankar, pointed out, in the past, one of the reasons counterterrorism was so effective was that terrorist structures actually had a very long tail behind their attack segment, with sensing, radicalization, it was actually relatively easy to, or should say easy, but it was possible to interdict the terrorist action through its various support structures. Israelis in particular became very good at figuring out how to do this. And today, the technology, because of online radicalization, because of drones, because of cryptocurrencies and so on, it is now much easier for an individual, just one or two people, to become an active terrorist cell. And radicalization no longer requires a complex structure or even a state structure of the kind that we used to, but being able to go out and set up an online network with and being able to get to people and youngsters through that method. So this makes terrorism still a very potent threat, but it also means that a new set of weapons or instruments are required to try and stop terrorists and prevent terrorists before they can act. And this needs to be kept, should we say, alive with the international community. And this is what I think bringing the UNSC Counter-Terrorism Committee to India was designed to do.
Okay, fair enough. Now that's a very significant part, General Katoch, looking at new ways, because the terrorists also, the terror groups are also looking at new avenues, new ways to go ahead and keep doing their malicious acts. But same way, significantly, the counter-terrorism efforts will also have to devise those ways, and then that's where come in the use of emerging technologies, the point which we were earlier talking about. Of course, there has to be a political will to deal with it. Can't be used as a political agenda, and the financing has to be tackled as well. But the use of new technologies is becoming very rampant here.
You see, as far as new technologies are concerned, I think the social media is one part of that new technologies. And most of these, when we talk about individual acts of terror, while the acts may have been carried out by an individual or perhaps a group of 2 or 3 people, they have got a huge organization behind them. Who gives the target, who indicates where to go, etc., who provides the weapons. So there is a huge ecosystem.
So mostly these platforms are used for recruitment, radicalization.
Yes, but even when you have recruited a person and radicalized him, that person to be effective on the ground, he has to be given certain directions. Now, I think this is the time when social media monitoring is becoming increasingly important, because all these people, in fact, if the analysis which has been carried out of terrorist attacks over the past decade, the terrorist per se has given indications in his social media account. So monitoring accounts, I think, becomes a very vital part of the counter-terrorism effort. That is one. Number 2, I think there is one thing which consistently is underplayed, and that is the impact of deterrence. Now, let us say there is a lone wolf attack in India, what we call a lone wolf attack, but I have always maintained these lone wolves are always supported by huge organizations.
Indeed.
Now, if it comes about in India and it is supported by Pakistan, then that is where we have to actually look into the deterrence effect. Now, that deterrence is not against this terrorist group. They are very small groupings, so they can't be deterred in that manner.
The support mechanism which they have.
But you can deter the country which is supporting them. And this is where I think the Indian state needs to look now, because internationally, well, we have done our bit. We put Pakistan on the dock for many, many years, right? And I've got a feeling within a year or 2, we'll get them back into the grey list in the FATF. That is a matter of time. So, as far as the Indian government stance is concerned, the MEA, etc., I think they're doing a great job. But I think there has to be an element of deterrence, and that has to be a show of force against the terrorist groups and the leadership. Now, let us, just to give you an example, Hafiz Saeed. Now, we don't know where he is. I mean, we know he's in Pakistan, but exactly where, which house, which room is he hiding? But the point is, we should make a statement. If we come to know, we will take him down. Now, that sort of commitment on the part of the Indian government or our Indian security agencies has to be broadcast and made known to the terrorist groupings, So when we do it, the world is not caught by surprise. But more importantly, people like Hafiz Saeed should not be able to sleep at night, not knowing whether a missile will come.
Okay.
So this deterrence, I think, should be now the next part of our strategy. We did it, okay, we did the surgical strikes, we did a strike on Balakot, but then after that there has been a lull. You see, and why I'm saying why we should do it is, we are still getting drones from across Pakistan with weapons and drugs, etc., etc. That is a breach of the protocol which we had signed with them. So when we go after the terrorists, I think we have got very firm moral grounds, a moral standing to do so. The way the Americans went after Osama bin Laden, I think India is strong enough now to go after them unilaterally on our own.
Okay, okay. Professor Pant, these two aspects. One is how to deal with the use of these emergent technologies. And then two, as General Katoji is pointing out, at the same time, pursuing a deterrence approach, keeping that as a very viable, open option.
See, I think, when you talk of terrorism today in the contemporary context, you have to look at a variety of instrumentalities available to a state that have to be brought on board. And I think that's why the conversation at the Counter-Terror Summit last 2 days have been quite interesting, because it has brought to the fore some of these issues which are less talked about, but I think are going to be increasingly potent as you deal with the changing nature of terrorism. And now that we know the changing technologies, how they are, how groups are responding to the incentives of technology, and how they are manipulating it to suit their interests, and how at some level nation states still do not have a framework within which to deal with it, is going to be an important concern, because we are, as societies, we are still struggling to get our heads around, the emerging technologies. We are trying to frame our governance structures, and we are trying to build institutions. We are trying to create laws which deal with, how we deal with some of these new technologies within our own societies. Now, that challenge becomes manifold. Where once you bring in the element of terrorism, and once you bring in the element of how those who want to use these instruments for nefarious designs, they are using these technologies, they are sharpening their tools, they are becoming more and more effective and media savvy. And of course, if you look at the ISIS, for example, they have been so effective in terms of using social media to attract new recruits, to radicalize a new group of volunteers, to launch attacks of the kind that I think we were discussing earlier. So I think the challenge is manifold, and unfortunately the international community or global governance architecture is a bit behind, as it always happens. So I think this conversation of the Counter-Terror Summit, I think, has been particularly useful, because it tells us something very fundamental, that there is something that the global governance architecture has to evolve, and evolve rapidly if we have to mobilize global resources towards that end. And this relates to the earlier question that we were discussing, that overt politicization of global governance would mean that you will continue to be a step behind, because international community will not be ready as a whole in dealing with some of these challenges. I think there was a foreign minister of Ghana who was there, and she made a very interesting comment. She said, well, if we know where the terrorists are coming from, if we have proper intelligence, and then we have gone ahead and we have attacked them. So I think this is about the second aspect that General Katoch was talking about, in terms of creating deterrence mechanisms, where nation states are also able to deter those actors who deliberately want to use this tool as an instrument of state policy, and who continue to live in this, continue to support this idea that, look, there is a plausible deniability about it all. So okay. I think in all respects, we have seen some interesting conversation happening. Whether or not we are still able to evolve a global governance architecture, that remains to be seen. But if like-minded countries again can come together and frame some responses to that effect, whether it is in terms of governance frameworks of new technologies, or in terms of creating new deterrence structures, whether unilaterally or multilaterally, I think that would be very useful.
Okay. Pramit, do you agree with that aspect, that time is running out when we're talking about evolving a global governance architecture or mechanism to deal with the threats of terrorism at a global level, and not fall for the politicization by X or Y or Z stakeholder here? And on the other hand, as General Katoch was pointing out, putting in place a deterrence mechanism as well for the individual nations.
Yeah, global governance is going to struggle in an environment in which you're seeing great power rivalry has been revived. It is hard to see the United States or Europe working closely with Russia, for example, on drone technology, trying to figure out ways to control the spread of the technology. It's hard to see the United States and China working together, hard to see India and China working together on such issues. And you're starting to see within the internet itself, whether on social media or elsewhere, you can see the world splintering, if you wish, into various structures, from very extremely tightly controlled China to relatively liberal United States, but so on and so forth. But nobody is being able to align their standards, their views on a lot of this. And as great power rivalry seeps more and more into the global system, it will be increasingly difficult. And a lot of the, should we say, existing terrorism cooperation structures that exist that were created, especially after 9/11, will start to fray.
Okay.
I think that's something we have to assume. And so we may have difficulties. These spaces that will be created will automatically allow terrorists to function.
Okay.
Just the fact that the world is diverted by other issues right now means that the ISIS or the Islamic State and Al-Qaeda are both spreading again across the West African Sahel region in an area running from from Senegal all the way to Lake Chad. If there is going to be another physical Islamic State, it'll probably be in this area because they've literally killed thousands, defeated a lot of the armies in that area or holding them back. But the world can't focus on this and probably will not until the Islamic State there is actually put together.
Okay.
And there, for example, the two primary foreign military organizations, France and Russia, are actually at loggerheads because of the war in Ukraine. They're not cooperating in fighting the IS, they're fighting with each other.
Okay, so there is that, threat which is alive there. Quick concluding comments from you, General Katoch, on this aspect of, evolving a mechanism, a global governance mechanism. Challenges we've spoken about, but according to you, what are the few things which need to be put in place right away? Because as Professor Pant was referring to it, we're obviously one step behind.
You see, getting into a global governance architecture, I think is going to be a very difficult task. Pamit is right. I'll just give you a theoretical example. Let us say terrorist attacks take place in Russia and China over the next 6 months. The West will not be concerned. I think they'll be delighted. Similarly, if attacks take place in Europe and in the United States, Russia and China are not going to be concerned. And when attacks are taking place in Africa where they keep going on and you have 50 or 100 killed, it doesn't even hit the headlines of any of the major countries.
Nobody's priority.
Nobody's worried, So I think now, as part of a governance, as an overarching governance structure, let us continue with the Financial Action Task Force.
Okay.
That is a very potent force. That is one. And number two, intelligence sharing amongst like-minded countries.
Okay.
These two things are doable. And this is where I think we should lay our emphasis on.
Okay. Thank you so much, General Katoch, Professor Pant and Pramit as well for sharing your views and insight with us and our viewers. As our experts were pointing out, of course, this is an ongoing battle against the threat of global threat of terrorism, and the stakeholders, that is all nations, will have to put their politics apart and obviously put in a cohesive approach there. But few key points where everybody will have to work together is ensuring that financing or terror financing is taken care of. The emerging technologies challenge is also dealt with, and at the same time putting in place a global mechanism, a governance mechanism wherein everybody is at the same platform. The effort should continue. We'll come back again on this aspect and other issues as well. Till then, keep watching Sansad Television. Thank you.